Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Maxine Davy, the marketing manager here at Red and Yellow. And thank you for taking the time out of your afternoon to join us for another industry webinar. We're going to wait a few more minutes for more attendees to jump in. For those who are unfamiliar with Red and Yellow, we are Africa's leading creative school of business. And it's our mission to train the next generation of change makers, creators, and innovators. Red and Yellow is all about giving your brand or business tangible and real advice and solutions to your business needs. And one of the ways that we do this is through our interactive webinars like the one you've joined today. So before we kick off our session, there are some quick housekeeping rules I just want to run through quickly. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please pop them into the Q&A chat box that you see on your screen. Our guest speaker has let us know that he's more than happy to answer questions as we go along. But if he doesn't get to your question, we'll do our very best to bring them up at the end of the session in a dedicated Q&A. Please note that the session will be recorded and a recording of the session will be sent to you within 24 hours. And please feel free to send it to those that you know couldn't make it today or to anyone that who will find it valuable. Right. So it's 3 minutes past one. Um, Without further ado, let's kick off. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today our wonderful guest speaker, Eric Fulweiler. Eric is the co-founder and CEO of Rival, one of the fastest growing marketing consultancies in the US, the UK, and in South Africa, working with challenger brands like Aura Ring, Wonder, and Webflow to help them scale, and incumbents like Reebok, Old Mutual, and Unilever to help them innovate. Rival's mission is to understand what challenger brands do differently to grow in those categories that are being disrupted. So, Eric, over to you. We are super thrilled to hear what you've got for us today.
Amazing. Bet everybody was curious with that intro, which accent you would hear. Unfortunately, it is American, but I'm based here in London. Although I did go to UCT back in the day, and so have a personal as well as now a professional connection to South Africa. But first of all, Maxine, Team of Red and Yellow, thank you so much for having me. Big fan of what y'all do and very excited to play a small part in contributing to the value of the community that you're building and the mission that you're on. And to everybody joining, I know there is never enough time to go around for you all to take the time to join a webinar like this. My hope is that I can add some value. And to Maxine's point about taking questions as we go, the way that I think about these things is I'm here because I know some stuff about challenger brands, having built Rival, some of the work that we've done, etc. And Maxine has given me some context on who many of you are and what you're interested in learning. But I want to try to connect those dots as much as possible to get out of my brain in the 55 minutes that we have anything and everything that is going to be valuable and interesting to you. So we've prepped a presentation that we think is going to do that. However, the best way and the most direct way for me to try to add value is to actually hear from you as you get to know me and Rival a little bit, what would be most valuable. So yes, it is hard with 88 people to try to keep up with the chat, but I will do my best. Please do drop questions in as I go, and then we will have time at the end as well to try to answer them. And I did get some questions that y'all put into the sign up page ahead of time, so I do have those kind of baked in here as well. All right, let's do it. Okay, so place to start. Who am I talking to you today? I think context is really important. We are, in many ways, the sum of the experiences that we've had. So I think it's important before I talk about what we do at Rival and what I've learned about Challenger brands to talk a little bit about my professional journey. So as I said, I went to UCT. I actually, funny story, I tried to stay in South Africa. I tried to get a job and nobody would give me a visa, including at oh, what was it called? There was like a big digital agency at the time that was really famous and it sold to a London agency. But I couldn't stay, so I ended up going back to the US. And I basically got into this whole world of like media marketing through the media door actually at Forbes in the early days of Web 2.0. So when Twitter, Blogger, if you remember that, Instagram, YouTube, when that was all becoming kind of a real channel for, of course, social media, but also for brands. I then met a guy, that pink face there, some of you might recognize. It's a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk. If you're interested in going down a very deep rabbit hole of content, entrepreneur content, look him up and check him out. But basically, I was part of building what became VaynerMedia, that is now one of the largest independent digital agencies in the world. I did a stint at a big traditional agency. Got a picture of Don Draper there because, in my opinion, obviously this is a vast generalization, I really feel like a lot of the big traditional agencies are stuck in the big traditional ways of doing things. So I was, let's say, not a fit for that world. I then moved to London and I got into the fintech space. So I've actually had a CMO role as well at a business called 11FS, and then set up Rival 3.5 years ago as a boutique marketing consultancy. And so I know Maxine gave my intro. Maybe some of you have kind of looked up who we are and what we do. But the short version, again, for context, is that we are all about understanding what challenger brands, disruptors within categories, category creators, what these brands that are challenging convention of how their category operates, what are they actually doing differently to grow faster than the incumbents in their space? And then, of course, the work we do, strategy, creative, paid media, data, technology, what you would expect from a marketing consultancy is how we make money, and that's our business model. But wrapped around Rival is this mission of understanding challenger brands and what the playbook for modern marketing actually looks like. Now, I know that some of you, y'all come from different corners of the marketing world. Some of you probably do work in startups, but I know that some of you also work at bigger established brands. I would argue, and the way that we think about it, you'll see some examples in here from the classic challenger brands, let's say, the ones that you would associate with the term challenger, startups, scale-ups, disruptors. But actually, our definition of challenger marketing is really just marketing that is fit for purpose for the world of today. Sometimes the way that I explain it is this term marketing debt. So if any of you have worked in a business that operates in and around technology, you probably heard the term technical debt, which basically just means that over time, if you install a certain technological system, it's going to be outdated and you're going to have to figure out, do you update it? Do you replace it? And I think the same is the case for marketing principles, practices, also marketing technology within organizations. Over time, if you are big and slow to adapt, you build up marketing debt. That means you're not marketing for the way that the world is right now. And that's really what we're trying to understand and really what we're trying to work with our clients on. So, getting into the actual conversation for today, I mentioned this kind of mission that we have around Rival. And the way that that mission actually comes to life is we have a team of people that are solely focused on producing content, research, interviews, events. We actually have one coming up in Cape Town, There'll be a QR code in this deck for anybody who wants to come meet up with us and check out that event on July 8th. But essentially, over the last 4 years, I've spent a lot of time with CMOs, about 150 now that I've interviewed. And as you can see here, this is just a selection of some of the logos. Some of them are obviously very big brands, Huawei, Shell, MasterCard. And some of them are the disruptors, the challenger brands that you would expect. Yeti, Tony's Chocolonely. We have the CMO of Time Bank, who's going to be presenting at our event in Cape Town in a couple weeks. So it's a very wide assortment of categories, but also stages of businesses that has kind of informed the research and the set of principles about challenger brands and really just modern marketing that I'm going to take you through today. Okay, last slide on kind of the upfront, and then I'm going to check the chat, see if there are any questions. Another way into this is that we are trying to understand if growth within a category is kind of this race between incumbents, the big established brands that have been around for a while that have scale but need to innovate to deliver marketing that is fit for purpose for the world of today, and challenger brands that are fit for purpose for the world of today, that are innovative, that are modern, but they don't have the scale. We're trying to understand what it takes to move incumbents along the x-axis to the right and challenger brands up the y-axis towards the top. So what does that top right-hand box look like where you are delivering modern, innovative marketing at scale? That's essentially what we're all about. All right. How can I get back to the chat here? Hold on, give me 1 second. There we go.
No questions yet, Eric.
No questions yet. Okay, no problem. Yeah, Adam, maybe you can. Adam is from the rival team in Cape Town. He can keep me honest on questions as they come in. All right, so what we are going to go through today, 4 things and then some questions. So the first is the Challenger Playbook. So these 4 years of research, 150 interviews, we basically distilled that down into 5 principles, the things that we see challenger brands do differently, that really any business of any size in any category can and should apply to be more effective with their modern marketing. And there'll be some examples within each. Quick heads up, there will be a lot of QR codes in this deck. So for each of the principles, there is a link, a QR code that links to the interview that we did with the CMO or the founder of that brand. So if you want to check out those conversations, you can scan the QR code there. There's a QR code we're going to talk about. We actually produced a documentary about the future of the CMO role. There'll be a QR code to that. I'm going to talk about some of the learnings for that. I was talking to Maxine, I think it was last week, prepping for this, and I was saying, we'll go through the Challenger playbook. I think the future of the CMO documentary research would be interesting, but also I was in Cannes last week. I posted on LinkedIn kind of my biggest takeaways, and she was like, oh, that would definitely be relevant to include. So I'll touch on that real quick. And another thing that I thought of that I thought would be interesting, of course, AI is the buzzword of the year and probably the decade for our industry. We have a slightly different kind of point of view on where we are with AI in marketing. So I thought that I would include that as well. And then questions. Okay, so the Challenger Playbook, 5 principles. At the core is differentiation. So this would apply to how you think about your brand. There's a methodology for how we do brand positioning work that I think will help illustrate what I mean by differentiation. I'm sure everybody's kind of heard that term. I think a lot of methodology and a lot of thinking around brand, particularly on the B2B side of the industry, but also in some cases on the B2C side of the industry, looks at what is the need of the audience that we're looking to solve for, and what is it about our product that's great, the CVP, the customer value proposition of what we do, our product or service. And businesses put those 2 things together, or an agency put those 2 things together, and that then becomes the positioning statement or the brand platform. And actually, what we've seen with these challenger brands is that the way they are able to stand out so much when it comes to the positioning of their brand or their product is that they introduce a third variable, differentiation. So they don't stop at what does the audience need and what does my product do? They say, what does the audience need? What does my product do? And how are we challenging the convention of the category? What are we doing that's different? Because they realize, and again, I think this is just what modern marketing needs to be, that it is preference that drives purchase, not just awareness or relevance. So you need to communicate with your brand positioning, with your product positioning, with all of your communications to the market. Why are you different in order for somebody to choose you? So that's the first one. Second one, cultural relevance. It has always been true that brands that are seen as more culturally relevant grow faster than those that aren't. It's about 2.5x. The brand within a category that is seen as most culturally relevant will grow 2.5x the category average or the ones that aren't. Now, the biggest thing that we see challenger brands do differently when it comes to driving relevance and cultural connection within their category is that they recognize that culture has been fragmented in the same way that society has, in the same way that media has. And so what they do is instead of trying to go top down macro culture relevance, getting the biggest celebrity, endorsing the biggest sports team, they look for smaller, but can sometimes be pretty sizable micro cultures where there are groups of more passionate people where their competitors, the brand's competitors, likely don't already exist. I'll get into a little bit more of like what that means in a couple examples in a second. But second principle would be driving cultural relevance through microcultures. The third would be talkability, and this is really where the creative and the go-to-market comes in. What we see challenger brands do very well is that they are able to, with every impression they deliver, the idea, the concept, the activation is not just geared towards making somebody pay attention, but actually making somebody pay attention and then talk about that experience or that ad or that event with other people. And it's that talkability, that word of mouth, that buzz that allows them to gain more as a brand. Fourth would be arbitrage. So, how can you or how do these brands get more in terms of return on ad spend for every dollar that they put into their working media or their non-working media for that matter? But for every dollar and every hour that they invest, how are they actually getting more back? And then the last one would be iteration, this constant drive to test, learn, evolve, iterate with everything they do. A lot of that is being data driven. And I will say it is one of the kind of consistent themes that I see interviewing the challengers that are growing quickly and the incumbents that aren't, is just the comfort and the appetite around data within the marketing stack. But actually, and I know this is a little bit harder to kind of digest and apply, there's just something to the mindset with these businesses. They're young, they're hungry, they're very mission driven. None of them are comfortable just doing things the way things have been done. They're all coming to things with a constant drive for how do we get better? How do we do things differently? How do we evolve? So those are the five principles. I'm going to go through examples of each in a little bit more detail. Again, QR codes if you want to check out the interviews that we did with the brands that help represent these principles. And really all of that at the end of the day, if we ladder that up, what is it about challenger brands that I think anybody can take and apply to their own business? It really is about engineering outsized impact. Because if you're the startup, if you're the David taking on the Goliath, you can't afford to outspend everybody. Oftentimes, your budgets are 1% of what the incumbents would be. So, in order to grow, in order to take category share from them, you have to be able to deliver outsized impact with how you approach and how you invest in marketing. That's really what all this boils down to at the end of the day. So, I had a call earlier today with the chairman of one of our clients. They're a household name brands, consumer packaged good. Everybody would have heard of them. And I was kind of talking about what we do at Rival, the Challenger Playbook. And he's like, yeah, but we're not a challenger. We're an incumbent. So I just want to make sure that your approach to how we're doing this work is not just fit for purpose for a startup, let's say. And I was like, we learn from the startups, but really it's about engineering outsized impact. Any business can and should apply these principles. You might apply them in a different way if you're a big global CPG business versus if you're a 10-person startup. But the principles, again, are about modern marketing that's fit for purpose for the world of today that helps you engineer intentional outsized impact with how you do marketing. All right, starting with differentiation. I talked a little bit about the positioning and how differentiation fits into the positioning. But really, and I know I'm talking to a bunch of marketers, so I usually bring this up if I'm talking to, executives or founders or people that don't come from a marketing background, but I think we're probably all on the same page and I'm preaching to the choir here. I think a lot of the business world, particularly if you're in B2B, particularly if you're in technology, thinks of marketing as advertising. The people that make the ads, the people that make things look pretty. We've all been in these conversations before as marketers. But really, marketing is my definition of marketing, anything that bridges the gap between the value of the product and the needs that exist in the market. So that is really the four P's, the original four P's, right? Product placement, positioning, promotion. And what we see with a lot of these challenger brands that best represent the importance and the effectiveness of differentiation when done right is that they're thinking about differentiating not just their logo and not just their advertising, but the entire experience and connection that they create with the audience and the consumer. On the left, one of my favorite challenger brands out of London, but they're also in the US right now, Here We Flow. They are a feminine hygiene and sexual wellness brand started by two women who basically, as they were thinking about how to, I think they might have started with kind of a more standard product packaging, but they were walking down the aisle of a supermarket, Tesco, Sainsbury, whatever it was here in the UK. And they were like, why do all the tampon boxes look exactly the same? Boxes, different shades of red, sorry, of blue or maybe pink. What if we do something differently? They bought a Ben and Jerry's tub and put tampons in it and said, well, what if this was our packaging? At least it's different. And that is now their kind of hero SKU. And they're listed in Whole Foods and they're listed in Target and CVS in the US and all that. Obviously, they've done a bunch of other things, but the red thread, we actually had Susan, the founder, speak at our the event that we're doing in Cape Town in 2 weeks. We just did one in London where we kind of bring in challenger brands to have them share case studies and learnings and all that. And she talked about how they are always thinking about, always have in their mind with any idea that they have around the product, around the advertising culture, how is this going to be different from the incumbents in our space? So they're a great example. On the right is Beavertown. It's a beer company now, I think at least in part owned by Heineken, but kind of a successful challenger brand beer out of the UK. And the thing that I love about this, and you'll definitely hear this in the conversation with Tom, who's the CMO, that QR code on the right, that ad could not be Heineken. It could not be any other beer brand. Nobody else is going to look like that. And the story is kind of random. The guys who started the beer brand, they went to their local pub and there was a guy who was a regular at the pub who sketched things like this. And they were like, hey, could you design our logo and our ads? And that's how it came about. But to that subheader right here, right below differentiation, the prompt that I like to use for our own team, but also throw this out there because I think it's a helpful and actionable way to actually start applying this topic within whatever you do on a day-to-day basis as marketers. If you took your logo off of your marketing, could it be your competitor? And if you look at these two examples, they are great examples of there is no way that if you took the Flow logo or the Beavertown logo off of this, that it could be their competitors. And that's when you know that you've reached the point of differentiation. All right, got a couple questions. Thank you, Alexander. How can a challenger brand tap into consumer emotion without falling into cliche or manipulation? It's a really good question. There were earlier versions of the principles that had authenticity included. And it was one that we ended up cutting out but it is something that comes up a lot in talking to challenger brands. There's another one if you want to check them out. Actually, I have their product right here. Ocean Bottle out of London, and they're a reusable bottle company. But basically, for every bottle you buy, they take 1,000 plastic bottles out of the ocean. We had the founder at one of our CMO founder roundtable dinners recently, and I'm sure everybody's come across these people. When you meet people that are just so authentic and committed to the mission of what they do, you just kind of know it when you see it. And I think that certain brands, you know it when you see it as well. So I guess what I'm saying is like the first thing is authenticity. If you authentically believe in the microculture that you're trying to tap into, the mission that you say your brand is on, then you're not going to fall into cliche or manipulation because it's not cliche or manipulation. If you're not, and I always use the example, I know it's a bit of a punching bag in the industry, but the whole Unilever thing where they were like, every brand needs a purpose, even if it's a mayonnaise brand, that I think gets a little bit trickier. Um, but I would say starting with and trying to find, there must be, even if you're a mayonnaise brand at Unilever, there must be some authenticity that you can tap into to communicate that will be relevant to the audience that you're trying to reach. And the other thing that I would say is like, I think the modern consumer, a lot of the change that's being driven within the industry, right, is technology lowers the barriers to entry and the barriers to distribution for products, services, brands. Like it's just so much easier to start and to advertise a company now than it was 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Now with AI coming in, it's only going to accelerate. That's only going in one direction. And so I think that the modern consumer, increasingly so, is looking for authenticity in a world where they get spammed with so many different offers and so many different messaging day in and day out. First step to a legacy brand can take to adopt a challenger mindset without alienating its existing audience. Another great question. So, if we're talking about a legacy brand, I'm just going to assume that we're talking about a big company. Um, I'm also going to assume, because this is the most common type of situation or conversation that we get brought into, that the CMO or the marketer is pushing for, hey, I think that we should, maybe don't say it this way or think about it this way, but basically, there's something with this Challenger playbook. I think that we should apply it here. And CFO, CEO, other people on the board are like, looking at it from a different perspective, right? Maybe they don't understand it as much. Maybe they have different priorities. Maybe it's a little bit more short term. What's it going to do for sales in the next 90 days? Maybe it's that type of thing. I always think that driving change comes from top down and bottom up. Top down education, you have to chip away at that sometimes, right? And sometimes it's not just you. Like, we do lunch and learns and things like this to help our clients kind of educate internally sometimes. And of course, there's other people and other resources and ways that you can do that. But then the bottom up is nobody can argue with the results, right? So oftentimes what we do, if it is a Unilever, is we will take a brand or a market and use our model or our playbook and basically prove that it works. So that's the way that I would do it. I know your question was a little bit more geared towards the audience, which I think ties into what I was saying about authenticity as well. Um, But I think the other thing that I would say, the thing that comes to mind for me is that quote, and I might not be getting it right, but um, I think people don't mind advertising, they just mind bad content. And a lot of advertising is bad content. I've actually been thinking about this recently, going back and forth from the office here in London. There's so many ads on the tube and all that stuff. And I'm like, why are so many of these bad? And it's just the reality of the world and the industry that we live in. And I think ultimately where it comes from is because so much of what goes into producing ads, especially at big companies, just because of the reality of those dynamics and cooks in the kitchen and bureaucracy and politics and risk aversion and all that stuff, so much of what goes into producing advertising is not just about what does the customer need and how can I deliver it to them. It is about how do I not lose my job? It is about, I've got this budget I need to spend before the end of the year or I lose it. It is about, well, the last time I brought this idea up, I almost got in trouble about it. It's about the CFO wants to cut the budget. It's about the CEO has his or her idea of what they think the campaign should be, whatever it is. And I'm not naive about that stuff. I've been in this industry for a long time, worked with the biggest brands in the world. That is what I call the work around the work, um, where it's not just to do something at scale. It's not just about the marketing. It's about everything else around the marketing to get everybody bought in and aligned to what you want to do. But at the end of the day, I think all growth comes from innovation on the customer's needs and being able to deliver on that, whether it's through the product or whether it's through the marketing. Great questions, though. Thank you. And thank you for breaking the ice on the questions. I know the first one's always the hardest. Okay, relevance and microcultures. Let me just do a quick time check. Great. So this whole idea of culture being defined for us within microcultures, not just macroculture. The other example that our chief strategy officer likes to use is if you all remember the movie Devil Wears Prada, um, Meryl Streep, when she was the Anna Wintour character, there's that scene where Anne Hathaway is in the room with her. Bear with me. I'm sorry if you haven't seen the movie, and Anne Hathaway is like laughing at them because she thinks that they're so ridiculous, like picking out the fashion show outfits for 2 years from now or something like that. And Meryl Streep goes into this whole dialogue where she's like, "Oh, you think you're special? You picked that sweater out. You don't even know that people in this room chose that sweater to be cool 2 years ago." And basically, that is an example of monoculture. Anna Wintour, 15 people at the highest levels of the fashion industry deciding what is cool, compared to where we are now, where influencers, different cultures, different individuals, Etsy, the culture of fashion is no longer, at least entirely, shaped top down. And there's a big opportunity, I think this ties into the arbitrage conversation as well, for brands to identify microcultures that are not as competitive. Other brands aren't playing there yet, where they can authentically, to the question before, reach out and connect with them. I'll give you an example. It's not on here, um, but actually it should be, and we should probably get them on the podcast. We did a project for Keurig Dr. Pepper in the US, big consumer packaged goods company. We worked with one of their coffee brands. And we go through this work, this methodology around identifying what we call the heart and the horizon microcultures. The heart microcultures are the ones that are a little bit closer to your brand and your product. The horizon ones are a little bit further out. And there's kind of like a risk reward ratio. The ones that are closer are maybe a little bit less interesting, but safer. The ones that are further out are a little bit more creative, but maybe a little bit more risky. For this coffee brand, I'll give you two examples, one of a heart and one of a horizon microculture. The heart microculture that we identified was, particularly in the US, and I'll know because I am part of this microculture, there are people who will drink iced coffee no matter what time of year it is and no matter how cold it is. And so we said, hey, this is a microculture. These people know each other. They nod to each other when they're in line at Dunkin' Donuts buying their iced coffee when it's 0 degrees outside. We should do something. We should make an ad in January promoting iced coffee. The Horizon microculture, a little bit further out there. I am not into astrology, but apparently there is something about Mercury being in retrograde. Anyway, there's a very passionate microculture around astrology. And so Keurig Dr. Pepper is going to look into actually doing a Mercury in retrograde limited edition product release for those people. So hopefully that gives you an example. They are not getting, Dunkin' Donuts in America got Ben Affleck as their spokesperson. That would be monoculture, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez. Microculture would be iced coffee. I forget what the term is that they actually call each other, but people that drink iced coffee in the winter, and then Mercury in retrograde. Another good example, Blank Street Coffee, which is a coffee chain here in the UK and also in the US, been very successful, very small marketing team as well. And they have just consistently identified cultural trends and either created products around them, like Herb Dr. Pepper did, or activated around them with their marketing and their advertising. Two that they did actually together were paddle, which I know is big in South Africa. Going to be playing one down there in a couple of weeks. And then also matcha. They created a matcha latte. On the right, don't want to leave our B2B friends out in the cold because all this stuff applies as much to B2B as it does to B2C. And actually, in many ways, I think there's more opportunity in B2B. Paddle, which is a payment technology company out of London. They're now $1 billion valuation, so a unicorn. Fascinating conversation. I think this is probably the best CMO, best B2B CMO interview that we've done on the podcast. They do all the stuff that you would expect for an enterprise product-led growth SaaS technology company. But actually, they've created this thing called Paddle Studios, which is essentially a Netflix of short video series around topics that they think their audience is going to care about. Doing work globally, finding tax breaks, how do you stretch your budget a little bit further? So those are, they didn't think about it explicitly this way, but within everything that I'm talking about, those are microcultures of B2B. All right, I'm probably going to speed it up just a little bit so that we have time for questions. Talkability, this is probably the one that everybody thinks about. If I had a nickel for every time I've gotten a brief in my agency career on like, help me go viral, have a lot of nickels. And I do think that some of that can be engineered with a focus on ideas that won't just fill ad inventory, but that will actually earn attention. I think the biggest shift in the last 20 years for marketers that, to be honest, many brands and many agencies for that matter have not yet compensated enough for is that this whole conversation around short attention spans. I'm not a psychologist, but I would say that the human brain has probably not changed that much in 20 years since we invented the internet, really in 10 years since we invented mobile. But what has changed is that people just have so many more options for the content that they can consume and how they can spend their time online. So people will only watch 6 seconds if it's bad content. They will watch a 3 hour movie or listen to a 3 hour Joe Rogan podcast if it's good content. So quality will always win. The best marketing is a good product. But if you focus on earning attention with the content you put out, not just is this going to check the box on the brief, but is somebody going to actually sit and watch this in its entirety? And will they then share it with somebody else and say, oh man, did you see this thing? Two examples. Peanut. It is a networking app for moms in the UK. We also had them at our recent sessions event here in London. They did this brilliant activation. It's a two-person marketing team. You should check out everything that they've done. And again, the arbitrage that they have is really through the creativity, I think, of their ideas. They went around London and put these sticky smiley faces on statues of women to basically highlight the fact that women, particularly mothers, are kind of expected in society to always have this smiling face on when a lot of that is really hard and a lot of them are really struggling, and yet society always expects them to have this smile. So you can see that is a very talkable idea. Two, Midday Squares, chocolate company out of Montreal, Canada. They do no marketing in the traditional sense. What they did is they started a reality show about what it's like to start a chocolate company in Montreal, Canada. So they've kind of taken that whole idea of building a media company around their brand instead of doing traditional marketing to the extreme because they recognize that it's about attention. And if you're thinking and acting like a media company, you're thinking about and focused on earning attention. Next, arbitrage. So there is something to this around where is there underpriced attention? And coming up in VaynerMedia, early days of social media, in many ways, we always said kind of attention is a stock market, right? When Facebook was new, it was really cheap because brands hadn't come to Facebook yet. When Snapchat was new, it was really cheap. There was media arbitrage, attention arbitrage there. But I actually think talking to more challenger brands, what's really interesting and where they find arbitrage is in the channels or the communities that can make them seem bigger than they are. Two examples, Yonder, credit card startup here in London. They bought Tube, this is Subway out of home advertising, but specifically next to Amex placements, which I think is really clever. And it makes them seem bigger than if you just saw that ad on its own. Yeti, they're supposed to be on the podcast on Friday, got rescheduled, but I know from the briefing, they have, I think, like a 20-person marketing team. It's only two or three that are actually focused on the brand of Yeti. The rest of them are specific community owners. Somebody for hunting, somebody for fishing, somebody for camping. So they've recognized and I think done a really good job. And I don't know, I don't think they're in South Africa, but you should definitely check them out. They're very, very big in the US. They've done a really good job of really investing in, authentically investing in these communities to make their brand seem bigger within those communities and finding arbitrage that way. Lastly, and then I'll check the chat, see if there are questions, iteration. And I would think about iteration in two ways. Obviously it's not, there's not that there's only two, but this helps me kind of frame up the two ends of the spectrum. One is 1% improvements, the Kaizen mindset. How do we constantly just get a little bit better? Bloom and Wild, which is a flower delivery and now a gift delivery service in London and in Europe. They've been very successful. They've invested in pretty heavily a customer insights team as part of the marketing function. And that team is constantly running surveys, analyzing customer feedback, running kind of mini focus groups with customers to understand what are people looking for that we're not delivering on right now. One of the ideas that came out of that was that people actually didn't want red roses for Valentine's Day. They just felt like they had to do it. So it was a bit of a marketing stunt, but based on customer feedback, one year they didn't sell red roses for Valentine's Day, which is a flower company. I'm sure you can imagine that drove a lot of talkability in the category. And then on the other side, Burger King, many of you are probably familiar with the Moldy Whopper campaign, but I put this in here because I think this is an example of a 10x idea, but also a system, having interviewed the CMO of Burger King, a system was put in place that led to this 10x idea. And that system, Fernando Machado, who was the global CMO at the time, Burger King has all these agencies all over the world, and it used to be that each CMO, each marketing team in each region would just manage their budget, manage their agencies. And Fernando created this big pot of money in the central office and said, any agency, any brand team, anywhere in the world can pitch me an idea and I will fund it from this pot of money. Probably resulted in a bit of a, I'm sure it was interesting to be part of that team or part of one of those agencies at the time. But I mean, you can't argue with the results in terms of the ideas, the 10x ideas that Burger King was able to bring to market during that time. So those are the five principles: differentiation, talkability, relevance, arbitrage, iteration. I won't go through this again. You can kind of read it, just a bit of a summary, and then also the prompt. And as I understand it, we're going to be sharing this deck as well. So you can always come back here. But again, just kind of like a brief summary of the five as well as actions. Oh, sorry about the QR codes. I will double check that. Thank you for calling it out. And if there are any that are broken, or, I'd suggest if you're interested in any of this, just you can obviously find it on our website, but the main podcast is called Scratch CMO Interviews. And, we've done about 100 and something at this point, so you can find them all there. AI. All right. Okay. Let me do this actually. I'm going to skip ahead to the AI slide and I will come back to the future of the CMO because I think this is helpful context for me to help answer that question. I put this out a little while ago on LinkedIn. I just didn't want to rewrite it in the slide. But basically, our belief or our position on AI is less of a technological one at the highest level and more of a human one. Meaning, if people have heard of, and if you haven't, you should definitely look it up, the Gartner hype cycle. We've seen this movie before. Whenever new technology comes in that's going to fundamentally transform how an industry or the world operates, we go through the same cycle. There is usually a slow buildup that a lot of people don't see and aren't exposed to. I think I think OpenAI was out with a model many years ago before it became mainstream. And obviously the idea and the functionality of AI and LLMs have been around for a really long time, but then you get this breakthrough moment, and when it's as big as something like AI, you get this big hype cycle, essentially. At a certain point, that bubble bursts. You have this thing called the trough of disillusionment, and then you end up on the slope of enlightenment. We are in a hype cycle right now on AI. We just are. It will fundamentally transform our industry in the world, probably more so than any other technology. I do fundamentally believe that. But it is a marathon, not a sprint. So much of what I'm seeing, talking to other agencies, talking to many brands, talking to people in the industry, investors, VCs, is a lot of solution looking for a problem with AI. What do I do on AI? How do I deliver on AI? Not to what I said before. I think all growth comes from delivering on customer needs. How can AI actually help me deliver on the needs of my customers? So it's a bit of a taste of where we are with it. Um, Not AI skeptics at all, although there is something to the pace of change with this technology, and the rate of evolution with this technology is not going to continue at the rate that it has been, but it will be the most important and the defining technology of our careers for sure. But I think the whole point of the marathon analogy is that we need to think about the chess moves of where is this technology going to bring us in 5, 7, 10 years, not the checkers of how do I adopt this new technology that came out, and make sure that as practitioners, we are actually getting in shape for this. We're not sitting on the sidelines. We're actually tasting, playing with, getting our hands dirty with this technology. So to answer your question on how are we using AI, we are using it to either make more efficient or differentiate the work that we do for clients. For example, we have a whole workflow going right now on how AI can help us run our operations more efficiently. We are also always look at anything that we are doing for a client. We say the first principle for us is let's bring AI to the table. How can AI help make this more efficient or more differentiated? So, for example, probably 30% of our creative production is AI generated, or AI, maybe we generate the first asset and then AI generates the supporting assets, but AI plays some role in about 30% of the creative output that we do. We also we did a couple projects around customer journey work for big brands. Customer journey work, at least in the US, takes 6 months, costs $500,000, really expensive, really slow. We worked with someone to develop, it's kind of now and still in beta, but basically a way to use first party data as well as a kind of stack of customized LLMs to be able to do that work in 6 weeks instead of 6 months. So that's how we're approaching it, is thinking about the long-term impact and implications, and then always bringing it to the table, playing with the new tools that are out there, but making sure that we are actually focused on efficiency gains or differentiation in the output, not just technology for the sake of technology. I actually, next week, there's a conference here in London, and I'm interviewing the CMO from Bloom and Wild. And one of the things she said on the prep call yesterday, I mentioned earlier that they have this customer insights team internally. She said that they are now using AI to moderate focus groups, which I thought was cool. So I'm asking her that on stage next week, but that was the first time I've heard something like that, and I think that could be really interesting. Okay, I'm going to go through this quickly, and again, you can check out the full documentary. So basically, we set out starting at this point. Only 71% of Fortune 500s have a CMO, and I think it's something like single-digit percentage that have a CMO on their board. CMO is the shortest tenured role in the C-suite. I'm sure we've all heard this. Why is this? And so we went out and interviewed, well, you know that we've done about 150 interviews, but specifically for this documentary and the folks that are on camera, it's about a dozen kind of leading CMOs, CEOs. We have a private equity person in there, an agency CEO who's really well known. Kind of where we got to at a lot of our conversations was like, oh man, there's a lot of risk, but also a lot of opportunity out there for CMOs right now. And actually, there's a lot of chatter about the role dying, getting disenfranchised. But really, with the pace of change and everything that's going on right now, there is a ton of opportunity for folks and marketers, whether you're a CMO right now, or probably more importantly, whether you plan to be a CMO in the future. I can't get rid of this 1 second. I just couldn't move the chat box. Okay. To not be beholden to the old model and to start building the skill set and the mindset and also shaping your organization to adapt the new model. So what does the future of the CMO look like? It takes a new playbook, it takes a new set of skills. And it really is based on this Challenger playbook, which of course I've already taken you through. So really the output of the research and the takeaways from the documentary are three things. First and foremost, the CMO of the future, or the most effective CMOs right now, communicate and speak the language of the board. They are board members first and marketers second. Related to that, but even more explicitly, they view their job and their focus on owning and delivering commercial results. Marketing is a means to an end. Everything that gets invested in, everything that you do with marketing is about delivering commercial results. Not only short-term results, there of course is a role of brand and long-term and everything else that we need to do as marketers, but there's no marketing for the sake of marketing. Marketing is a tool to deliver business growth. And thirdly, probably not a surprise, they are able to, whether individually or actually what we heard a lot of is they get the right people around them to make data, technology, and now AI a competitive advantage. So check out the documentary if you're interested. There's some stuff in here, and of course in the documentary about what to do with those three takeaways. And yeah, probably worth 30 minutes of your time if you're interested. I did the AI takeaways. I will give you the quick takeaways from Cannes, so the big advertising festival in France that I went to last week. So you can obviously check these out on my LinkedIn, but basically the big things for me are it was amazing how little visibility the big six holding companies had. Like, yeah, did not see much of them at all. And of course, even 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when I started going to Cannes, they were the main brands with the big spots on the beach and the big activations and all that. Now that's the next generation, who of course not are not at the same size and scale, but they're starting to get there. Stagwell, Brandtech, VaynerX, etc. However, I do think that they are going to get caught a little bit in the innovator's dilemma of they've got this big business that was built pre-API, sorry, pre-AI, and they're going to have to figure out how to innovate and adopt AI into what they do. There's a little bit more optimism in the market than I was expecting. Maybe it's because we've got so many ties to the US and there's a lot of stuff going on there that's having ripple effects all over the world, but there was a little bit more optimism from the people that I talked to. Definitely a bubble in AI. Every single technology company, every ad for some new ad tech, martech company was just AI plastered all over it. Interestingly enough, there was a lot of conversation not just about AI adoption, but also how offshoring in South Africa came up a couple times. How offshoring is a way to compete in a world where AI is going to replace a lot of human jobs, at least in the West. And per the last two, there's going to be a lot of agency talent in the market in the next 12, 24 months, unfortunately. I do think it's interesting. Everybody's talking about AI and what I said before, technology lowering the barrier to entry and distribution, just the amount of content that's going to be consumed and pushed in front of everybody over the next few years is crazy. And I actually think there's going to be a premium and kind of a pushback eventually to real, authentic human experiences. So it kind of got me thinking, we've had some conversations about do we want to build or buy maybe a experiential capability. Because I think people are really going to be looking for like human, meaningful connection in a world where they have so much fake stuff thrown at them all the time. A lot of conversations around influencers over the last year in particular. There's been a lot of big acquisitions of influencer agencies. I think that'll be interesting with the AI influencers that are already on the scene and are just going to grow. And then B2B seems to be having a bit of a moment right now. And then last one, had a few meetings with people in the Middle East. I've done a good amount of work down there. It seems like things are really changing in Saudi, which just really changes the situation in that region for businesses like ours. Okay, Q and A. Sorry, we only got 5 minutes. Um, but I will say, let me just say before we go through that. Well, first of all, if any of you are in Cape Town and around on July 8th and want to come hang out, we're doing a morning session event at our office at Innovation City and Gardens. We are going to have the creative lead from Field Bar, if you know them, really cool brands out of South Africa, as well as the CMO of Time Bank doing presentations and fireside chat. So just be like a small get together, marketers, basically conversations like this. I'll be in town. Adam's based in Cape Town with us, as well as the rest of the team. So you're very welcome. Would love to see you there. And then I will say, and then I'll go back to the questions. If there are follow-up questions, Maxine, feel free to share my email with people. But also you can find me on LinkedIn. That's my email right there. Or of course, wearearrival.com. But let me see how many questions I can get to in 4 minutes. Um, it's really hard to stand out as an agency because there is no barrier to entry to starting an advertising agency. Any of you tomorrow could start an advertising agency. I think the way to stand out is with this media company model, which is what we've done at Rival. And I showed you two examples, Paddle and Midday Squares, that's doing that as well. I do not worry as much about standing out. I worry about standing for something and having the credibility behind what we stand for. So we have now 4 years. The first hire I made for Rival was a producer to do all this content. And now we have 4 years of research. I'm standing in front of you because of that. We have credibility, authenticity in what we stand for. And I think if you put out a point of view that's authentic and valuable, people will find you. Um, Second question, really interesting question. I think the things that you need to do to maintain your edge as you scale as a challenger brand are different. But at the end of the day, the thing that will always guide you in the right direction is really two things: understanding customer needs and being able to move quickly. I think speed is the biggest advantage that startups have over large organizations. And I think the role of any leader, CMO, CEO, whatever it is to think about and constantly push for how can I make this company move faster. The culture of challenger brands, I probably talked about that a good amount. Iteration, arbitrage, differentiation, etc. But I would say that there is definitely something, that example that I gave about the founder of Ocean Bottle, where what you see on the outside is a reflection of what exists internally. And so actually, I think when we talk about marketing, we barely talk about, and shame on me, I didn't mention once, internal communication. And actually, that should be a big part of the CMO's role. The personally stay inspired, that's really easy. One of the silver linings about the media company model is it's part of my job to interview all these CMOs and host these events and have these dinners with CMOs and founders. So yeah, I've got that hack figured out, I guess. All right. I'm sorry if there were more questions that I didn't get to. Maybe not. Somebody asked for the Rival event screen. There you go. But yeah, I know that we're up on time. Thank you so much, Maxine. I'll let you close it out, but please do find me, connect with me. Would love to hear from you and continue the conversation if it's relevant.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Eric. I've got a whole page of just golden nuggets that I've taken out of today's session. Thank you for your insight and thank you for giving us that practical advice. I'm sure we've all taken so many learnings from this. Thank you to our attendees. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As mentioned before, we will be sharing a recording of today's webinar, and we will also be sharing this presentation deck with the QR codes updated. A couple of you have highlighted there were some issues with the QR code, so we'll fix that. And yes, please join us on the Join Rival, join join us on the 8th of July. It's going to be incredibly awesome. And yeah, watch out on our social channels for more webinars. Follow Eric on LinkedIn, follow Rival. They're doing some incredible work out there and something we can all absolutely benefit from. Thanks,
And we're
everyone.
and we're hiring in Cape Town. You'll see that on our website as well.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good one.
Thanks,
Hope to see you
Adam.
soon.
Have a good one.
Bye.